Shalom, everyone, and welcome. We're actually doing a crossover episode right now because this is both day 8 of With All Your Heart, and it's also going to be our Coffee and Connection week 146. That's my weekly podcast, and I wanted to tell my broader audience that they could join us for today. For anyone who, I'm missing connecting with. And so we're going to do both together, but we're definitely continuing on the path that we've been taking in these trainings for the last 7 days and continuing today into day 8. The eighth stage, the eighth module, the eighth step of this process is a very, very important one. And I know I always say that, but this stage is so important because before we can talk about communication, which is going to be the next one, before we can get there, we need all the steps that we've been talking about leading up to it until now. But there's another important step. There's another important kind of piece that we need to make sure we're aware of and working through inside of ourselves as we're getting ready to talk about even difficult things with our husbands, things that we think differently about, things that might be challenging, things that might cause, emotions to run high, things that are very, even like I said, challenging, and for it to be able to still actually come out of it creating connection, right? We often think of those kind of loaded conversations or anything where we disagree, anything where we have differences of opinions, or even just things that are hard to deal with, like figuring things out, whether it's something big like where you're going to live, where your kids are going to go to school, how to handle a challenge that's coming up, or it's something small like what should we do for Shabbos, or should we get new couches, or how do we handle this chinuch issue that we're having. Whoops. Whether it's a big thing or a small thing, that's where a lot of the issues come up in our relationship, is dealing with these kinds of challenges. And as much as it may feel like having those conversations is going to lead to disconnection, it's going to lead to pain, it's going to lead to hurt, right? We talked a little bit yesterday about telling your spouse things that are bothering you and making space for your spouse to tell you about things that bother them. These things, as much as they may sometimes be difficult to have these conversations, what if they didn't have to actually create disconnection? Right? What if you could have these conversations, deal with your differences, deal with the challenges, and actually feel more connected when you come out of it? Because number one, you have the tools as to how to talk about it. And also, it means that you shared with each other. You were real, you were authentic, you were vulnerable. Now you know your spouse, you know your husband better than you knew him before. He knows you more than he knew you before. You shared not just about the issue, but what it means to each of you. What is coming up for you, your desires, your fears, all of that, that can actually bring you closer when we do it authentically, when we do it with empathy, when we do it being our real selves and talking about what's really going on. And that's why one of the most important pieces in being able to have that be able to happen, if that feels like I cannot even imagine it, then one of the most, Bezrat Hashem, I'm excited for you to experience it. One of the most important pieces that is being able to deal with stress and knowing how to deal with stress within ourselves first, so that when we're dealing with it in the relationship, we also know how to talk about it. We know how for it not to create that disconnect just because it's happening. And stress in and of itself creates disconnect, not just because it can cause fights, and not just because it can cause us to um, like having to deal with disagreements, which can feel very stressful in and of itself, especially if we have beliefs like me and my husband should always always have the same beliefs about everything, and we should be the same. And if we disagree, then it must mean something's wrong with us. And if we're fighting about this, it means that we're not meant to be married to each other. That in and of itself could be stressful. But also at the same time, when we're feeling stress, we tend to get triggered, which can have us, as we've been talking about, not be the women we want to be, right? Not be in that mindful state of what am I looking to create? What is it that, how do I want to show up in my life? We're more just getting triggered and responding defensively or by attacking. Or number three, and this is the big thing that happens with stress, is that we often shut down. And yes, life is stressful. There's always going to be stress coming up in our lives. There's always going to be things that can create stress. Let's put it that way. Whether it's trying to get everything done. I was a few minutes late because I'm trying to get through my piles of laundry that I realized today. And I was like, I can't wait an hour and a half to put in another load. And I had just realized that one was finished, right? There's always going to be laundry to do and dishes to wash. There's always going to be financial things to deal with. There's always going to be, please God, children to deal with. There's always going to be the world at large that could be creating stress, at least in the present reality that we live in a galut reality. Bezrat Hashem will live in a time when there's no stress. And for now, life is stressful. So it's important to know how to deal with stress. And like I said, a lot of times what can happen in stress is that we kind of become in that overwhelm of the stress, we can start shutting down and really shutting down instead of feeling like, oh, I have this issue. Let me talk to my husband about it. It will often cause us to not talk about it. Right? We really, as much as we talk about men going into their caves and not talking about their issues, the truth is women do that as well, right? Because we feel like we should have it all together. I just need 1 second. I'm just gonna get a tissue. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay. I brought my tissues with me. Okay. Lots of allergies today. So we need to know how to deal with stress. So I want to talk today. I just like give kind of, a few things that we can keep in mind when we're dealing with stress. I'm going to give you as much as I can out of the, lots that we could talk about that I think will make the biggest difference. Okay. So we talked about why it's important to deal with our stress. Here, let me just make sure I don't miss anything out because I could just talk and talk and I want to make sure that I get to what we really need, what I really wanted to share with you. So, stress causes overwhelm, it causes us to feel triggered, and it causes us to shut down. And usually, if you really ask yourself, what is it that's causing me stress in this moment? Not like, okay, I'm stressed because I have all this laundry to do, or I'm stressed because I don't know what the kids are doing in the summer, or I'm stressed because my husband's in a bad mood, or I'm stressed because I have, a million emails to answer, or whatever it is, whatever's causing you the stress. I actually invite you to go a step deeper and ask yourself, what about that fact is actually stressing you out? Because usually what's actually stressing us out when you see a pile of laundry, when I see the mountain of laundry that was taking over my laundry room and pouring into my bathroom, and actually most of my other areas of my house today, there were still tablecloths from Shabbos and there's towels in the kitchen and my hamper is still full. And when I think of all that tower, it's not like, oh, there's laundry and that's what's stressing me out. What's actually stressing me out is, will people have what to wear? How am I going to get through this? Like, there's so much of a mess. And then we want to go even deeper. So, what is my real fear about that? Am I afraid about this? Then it'll be stressful in the morning. Am I afraid? We want to look for like the stories. We want to look for the aspects of like perfectionism even that may be going on there, right? Will everyone be stressed out in the morning? My daughter needs clothes to take with her when she leaves tomorrow to go to school, to go to her national service. Like I have kids coming and going all the time that need to pack up to go, and then my boys won't have what to wear to cheder. Maybe a fear of what if the kids will want to bring over friends if there's such a mess. Like I'm thinking of different fears that could happen. I'd have to think about what really was coming up for me in that moment. I think it was, I have to get all this laundry done. And then even that is like a story of, there can't be laundry. Like it's a story. And then we could ask ourselves, well, why? Why can't there be laundry? Like, what's wrong with there being piles of laundry as long as everybody has what to wear? But it's like, notice like there was a fear of it's going to take over. Now, that's a simple example, but sometimes it could really be a fear of somebody's going to be upset. My kids will be angry. My husband won't think I'm a good wife. I'll feel unstable. Maybe it means I am unstable, right? These are the kind of stories I could definitely have gotten caught up in the past. The fear of people will walk in and see the laundry, right? Like it could cause these fears. And that's where I'm going to invite you to really recognize in your stress is that all stress is caused by what we're making that thing mean, and it's usually rooted in a fear of what will people think, a fear of not being enough, a fear of what it's going to mean for the future, a fear of not being loved, a fear, again, of not being a good enough fill in the blank. And when we are in fear can cause us to do some very interesting things. Fear often has us react, right? If we get caught up in the fear, then what can happen is that we start acting in ways trying to fix the fear that can actually create what we're afraid of. I want to give a bunch of examples about this because it's a very, very powerful concept to recognize. Because when we're in fear, we often think that the answer is to just quickly try to deal with the fear, right? Whatever, excuse me, wherever we're afraid is going to happen, that we have to stay in the fear in order to get out of it. Sorry. And in that moment, if we think of not answering the fear, not dealing with the fear, then we tell ourselves, but then the fear is going to happen, right? So let's say you have a fear. I'm going to use some really classic examples that have come up. I've seen them over and over again. Let's say you have a fear that your husband doesn't love you, that he won't love you for unless you're the perfect wife, right? Or he just doesn't love you. Now, in that fear, when you're really afraid, my husband doesn't love me, or I'm not enough. I have to be, you know, yeah, let's just go with that. He doesn't love me. Okay. Then how would you act? What would you do out of that fear that he doesn't love you? I'll give you some classic things that I've seen, but I want you to really think for yourself, and you can even put it in the chat. Like, what would that bring out in you? What would you start doing? What would you be thinking? And what actions would you take out of a fear of my husband doesn't love me? A lot of times, if a woman feels my husband doesn't love me, she'll actually try to be what she thinks her husband wants her to be, which is actually not being herself. So then, even if he does love her, she'll feel like he doesn't really love me. Someone saying I'd start rejecting him. So that's a good one. Like if he doesn't love me, so let me distance myself from him so that it doesn't hurt as much if he doesn't love me. It could cause a woman to get clingy, right? Let me try to prove like and get him to love me and like kind of be very needy to him. It could cause her to try to prove herself, which can actually feel kind of controlling. And again, she's not being necessarily authentic. And what is the crazy thing is that let's see if another one was given, somebody would try to please him all the time. She would get him to love her. That's what she would think. If I try to please him all the time, I'll get him to love me. Now, usually what actually happens, first of all, even if he does then love her, she won't actually feel love. My husband only loves me because of all the things I do for him that are not necessarily really me. I'm doing them to get him to love me. And then she'll still feel like he doesn't love her. Or if she's being clingy and needy and overwhelming or very like, do you love me? Or like and not being confident in that he loves her, she could end up pushing him away, especially if she actually does push him away. And then she'll feel like she'll see, look, he really doesn't love me. And so, what we see here is an example of this concept of the fear creating the fear. This also happens, by the way, when women have almost an opposite fear of, I have a fear that my husband will like leave me alone, like he'll leave me. Whether he'll walk away or God forbid he'll die and I'll be left alone. And out of the fear of being left alone, and I don't want to feel such a loss, they distance themselves from him, but then they're actually feeling alone even when he's right there beside him. That's one, those are two different ways that you can actually see how the fear can create the fear. We also see this specifically with children. I'll give a very clear example. Let's say you have a fear that a child is going off the derech. They're not so connected to the chinuch that you're giving them. And so you start to get out of that fear. If you're acting from a place of fear, what would you do? You'd start pressuring them, right? Pull down your skirt. Where's your kippah? Did you bench? Did you daven? Where are you going? Who are you with? Like being very on top of the child. And that actually can cause the child to push away out of like, leave me alone, and create more of a rebellion from what may have started as just trying to find their way. Now, I'm not talking about not setting boundaries. That's in a whole separate conversation of how to instill these things in our children as they grow and get older and we deal with their own stuff and they deal with their stuff. But to recognize that truth of the more we try to push them to be something, it could actually end up pushing them away. And that's this crazy thing of the fear creating the fear. We actually see it all over the Tanakh. I could give you like so many examples. I'll just give you one. The classic example is Yosef and his brothers, but it also happens with Paro. It happens in so many stories, but I'll just tell the Yosef story where Yosef tells his brothers his dreams, and then and they say, "Oh no, he thinks he's going to be a ruler over us. We'll send him down to Mitzrayim." So they send him down to Egypt, where he becomes the viceroy, and gives this great plan to have food for everyone. They end up coming down to Egypt and bowing down to him. So out of their fear that he would become this ruler that they would bow down to, they created a reality where that's what happened. And Hashem is not telling us this story just to teach us what happened to the brothers. I mean, there's layers and so many messages. One of the messages that we can get, and again, we see it over and over. You can start thinking of all the examples of this. It's everywhere. That are when we live from a place of fear, we end up creating what we're afraid of. And that's because we go into this place of trying to control what's going to happen. Let me control how my husband sees me. Let me control how my child feels about Torah. Let me control whether or not my brother becomes a ruler, right? Let me control whatever's going on. And when we act from a place of let me control from what's outside of me, this phenomenon that we actually can end up creating exactly what we're afraid of. And it's very important to recognize how our fear is creating our fear, and or how it could be or how it is, to help us realize that staying in the fear is not helpful. It doesn't help the situation. If we just sit here afraid, then you're not going to help a situation. Even if right now I open my news and I start reading the news and I start thinking about the soldiers and how their lives are in danger, and I'm thinking about the hostages, and if I just sit here thinking about what's going on and my fear of like what else is going to happen, God forbid, and what could be, I would literally just be frozen in my chair. There's nothing I could do to help the situation, or I would probably start getting very stressed and very overwhelmed, right? And then if my kids came in and started trying to talk to me, or my husband was like, "Hey, Hannah, want to hang out?" I'd be like, and I probably would not be a very loving, bringing, positive zchuyot into the world in any way, right? So when we're in just thinking about the fear, we're not helping anything. And in many situations, we end up creating exactly what we're afraid of, if unless it's really we just end up not being able to help the situation at all. And that's where, when we have that recognition, we can do what I call the shift. This is whenever I say we can shift, this is always what I'm talking about, is shifting from fear to desire. Because when you're in fear, you're focusing on what you cannot control. Desire, when you shift to your desire, what do I want? What do I want to create? Then you could ask yourself this very important question: what is in my control to create that? And if what you come up with that you want is like, well, I want my husband to love me, I want my child to be on the derech, I want everyone to be safe. Okay, that may be your desire. That's not in your control. What Then you ask again, you go back to that question: what is in my control to create that? Excuse me. Well, I can be my best self and bring love into the home. I can connect with my child and just be my love for Hashem. I can say Tehillim and talk to Hashem and see if there's any other chesed I can do for anyone that needs it, right? I can look at what can I actually create? What is actually in my control, and to stay focused on that, because that's actually how we have any influence in this world, right? If we're trying to control what we can't control, we end up creating what we don't want. We end up feeding our fear, when instead we shift to what I do want, what is in my control, that's how we start creating what it is that we want. And this is really important. I telling you, this exercise, when I teach it in my Absolutely Feminine program, it's a whole exercise. I teach this like, whole like, I don't know exactly how many steps it is. I'll tell you why I don't know exactly how many steps it is, because I've broken down a process into the step-by-step form that in this point in my life, I do in about 2 seconds. And my clients also do very, very quickly. It's literally the way my brain started thinking as I learned these tools and started shifting the way I was being in the world and creating very different results in my relationships and teaching it to others. And then I had to kind of go into my own brain and, like, what's that word? When, like, you, what's it, counter engineer or something like that? You go backwards. And I realized all the steps that my brain had started taking, like this. Okay. So it sounds like a lot when I'm telling it to you, but it actually can become a way that you're can constantly shift from a place of stress or fear or overwhelm to staying in a state where you feel empowered, where you have control over yourself, where you actually feel like, what can I create? And you don't feel like you're stuck and waiting, or stuck in a misery because of other choices other people are making. It's always you're always giving yourself the clarity of, what can I create? And that's going to change the way that you think, the way that you feel, the way you connect, because you're going to, first of all, not be in a triggered state where you can't connect to other people, or where you find yourself yelling at others even though you don't know why, right? Like, you're stressed about the news and you're yelling at your kids. You're stressed about your husband and you're yelling at the computer, right? You're stressed at your husband, and so you're taking it out on the kids, or whatever it is. You can stay out of that kind of state. You can share and be vulnerable and real about your feelings, because you're actually aware of, what do I want? What's causing me fear? And it allows you to actually then communicate what's going on for you, right? Without feeling like the fears are something that, like, when we're engrossed in our fears, we're very in them. And it creates a feeling of shame, not being able to talk about it, not being able to, like, show that you're afraid. And that's what's so powerful about being able to make the shift to, what do I want, right? What do I want to create? And then you're in the realm of what actually is in my power. So this is a very important stage in empowerment and in not feeling stuck or like life is hopeless, or all those questions that can come up, like, did I make a mistake in marrying him, or am I a bad mother, or am I stuck in this situation, or you know if only he would get help, if only things would be easier at home, if only there was a different reality in the world. That none of that is in our control. All of that is going to create a feeling of hopelessness. And this is, I wanted to give you a real taste of the power of shifting into, what do I want and what is in my power to create that, and see the real difference that that can create in your life. So I'm going to give you a little bit of homework you can do, is to notice over the next 24 hours something that's stressing you out, something that's causing you to feel overwhelmed, and stop for a moment and ask yourself, what am I afraid of right now? And sometimes it takes practice to really get in tune with your fear. Just keep asking yourself, and why is that so scary? Right? What's the worst thing that can happen about that? Why am I afraid of that? Just keep asking that till you get to the real fear. You can even ask yourself how your fear could end up creating your fear, if you want to be like, on a little bit of a mastery level. And then you can ask yourself, and what do I want? What do I want to create? And what's in my power to create that? Even if you can ask yourself one of those four questions, see the difference that it can make for you. Okay? So we are going to shift into the VIP sessions. Definitely, we can do some coaching on this and see how fear creates fear and all of that, and how to shift into empowerment on those sessions. If you would like to join those sessions and you're not yet a VIPer, just go to withallyourheartseries.com/VIP, and you'll get access to all the recordings of the past ones and the interviews and the trainings and everything. Definitely happy to have you there. And we get to talk one on one, which is fun as well. And please take a moment to, when we finish, say a parakaf Tehillim, speak to Hashem from your heart. Let's daven for everyone to be safe in their homes, back home, stay home. And Bezrat Hashem, we should all continue this journey feeling love and safety in our homes together. I'm also going to still invite you to share it with your friends, share with your family. I don't know if you've all seen, but if your friend puts in that she got it from you, at the end of the series, I do I take all those names and I do like a draw, it's on the computer, but it's like a raffle kind of, like it picks one. There's a way to like pick a number, and that person gets a VIP day with me, which is like a whole day of coaching. It's like 4 hours of like a real deep dive. It's really awesome. So much can be accomplished in one of those VIP days. So, and I like never do them. This is like a special thing that I do just to help spread the word, spread the love, spread the connection as much as we can. So share with your friends. There's still a full week of With All Your Heart. And you can tell them, I'll give you a little secret. You can tell them that even though they missed, they'll have missed 6 or 7 of the interviews and trainings, there'll be a playback period at the end. There'll be an all access that they'll be able to access all of them. So they don't have to miss anything. So please share and keep coming back. The Ezrat Hashem, to log. Great that you joined the VIP. How do you log in? So at 9 o'clock, or wherever you are in the world, at 2 p.m. Eastern, you got an email with the information on how to log into the VIP. Okay, so we're going to go do that now. Everyone, great to have you here. I hope you enjoyed. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I can't wait to hear the difference that this makes for you. And until then, may we all be blessed to live, love, and be loved with all our hearts. Goodbye for now.